It is Special Access Need to Know Wednesday, Florida Maquis. If you are here, you are at the $10 subscription level. This is the standard field grade promotion for the top secret trainees from Iteration 1. You are now at the top level of technical training at the Florida Maquis. This is going to get intense. It's going to get very involved, and there's going to be a lot of moving parts. That's why I encourage everyone to go back through videos, go back through training, and make sure that you are up to speed on things. What we're going to be talking about today is two terms that are referred to in Latin. So, might need a pen, piece of paper. The first term is something called reductio ad absurdum. That's where it's a fallacy of logic that basically states that if ABC happens, then taking out to its ridiculous, farthest possible conclusion, then something absolutely terrible is going to happen. For example, here, consequences of proposition are absurd. Dress code is too strict. So if anybody would want to relieve some of the requirements of a dress code, someone would then make the argument, well, if we start taking away laws now, then eventually people are going to start showing up naked. It's just taking things out to a ridiculous level. And it happened a lot in the last election cycle. I have no doubt that many people voted for the current guy, completely aware of how bad he was because of the reductio ad absurdum that was used for the competition. Now, I wasn't a fan of Clinton, but there were better choices. There were two other people on the ballot. And of course, the reductio ad absurdum there is that, well, if we vote for somebody like that, then, that's just a slippery slope. Speaking of the Libertarians or the Green Party. This is one of my favorite ones right here. So an assumption is made, and then the assumption is corrected, and then cognitive dissonance kicks in, and then a second false assumption is made because here this person corrected this person and told them they're wrong. So there's automatically the negative. So you're North Korean, really. And then, of course, the third false assumption all in a row. And this is how things are done in the media. This is why we talk about this with PSYOPs. This is a tool where you can just take little pieces of information and throw them into people's minds, and logic fallacies will take over, and they will start running through social media like wildfire. Here's another good one that, see if I can get that a little bigger. People have. This was the one about everyone's aware that since no restrictions on weapons, then of course everyone's going to want to own bazookas, cannons, and nuclear bombs because technically they're arms. Now, even the most staunch pro-gun person would never say that people should be allowed to own tanks. I mean, could you imagine if somebody won the lottery, they won, $700, $800, $900 million, and all of a sudden they were, buying surplus anti-tank weapons and perhaps an A-10, armed. It just would be ridiculous. But once again, reductio ad absurdum, this can be used both directions. Now, the second term was post hoc ergo propter hoc. Now, this was used in an episode, I can't remember, it was one of those TV shows about the president and his advisor, not the current president, it was from years ago. But the idea was this: his campaign advisor was saying that all this happened and this happened, therefore you lost this state and you lost this state because this and this and this happened. And he was showing her the fallacy that in her mind that because this thing happened and then this other thing happened after it, then the two things were tied together. 1 second here. I'm trying to get the, for some reason my Zoom is not working at the moment. Just give me 1 second. Okay, there we go. Now what this does is this particular person, and you can pause this if you want to read it, is making the allegation that babies are shaped like footballs and have more bendable bones than adults. And the reason that they are like that is because primitive man would have wanted to spread his genes as far as possible, and they accomplished that by punting babies from village to village. And they were able to, of course, survive because they had extra body fat, and the hairlessness made them more aerodynamic. And this is, of course, how modern man propagated the species around the world, by simply having babies and punting them. Literally drop-kicking them. That's all of the arguments made. And it's just false correlations over and over and over again. And unless you look, and in these days, you literally have to look into every single story. And one of the hallmarks is this. If you watch, sorry about this, I'm looking for something. Well, it looks like I lost it. Darn it. Oh, here it is. If you read an article, or you listen to a news program, or you even watch a YouTube video, and you find yourself reacting to it emotionally, or by, oh my gosh, I'm angry, oh my gosh, I'm scared, oh my gosh, I'm super happy. If it was simply an act where you went to garner some information about a certain topic, and then instead of walking away with information, you walked away with an emotional state, more than likely you have been the victim of a psychological operation or some type of logic fallacy that someone was using and parlaying to get you to operate and think in a certain way. This is all over YouTube. I've told people this before, and I'll leave with this. In the last election cycle, and the reason I keep going back to it is because it's such a wonderful example. I didn't like either one of them. They were friends for years. Trump gave money to Democrats for decades. In fact, he was on Capitol Hill arguing against Ronald Reagan's tax cuts. Now, I don't have to subscribe to all of the nonsense that the left says about him to, in my mind, say he's not a good choice. I don't have to fall into I don't have to go that far. Same thing on the right. Hillary Clinton looked like she was very physically ill. She has a history of corruption. She has a history of bad decision making. And that's where it ended with me. I didn't need to believe all this Pizzagate nonsense and all of this ridiculous stories that people were cooking up. Just the simple facts of their histories completely disqualified both of them in my mind, which is why I was looking at a third party. And this is another allegation that I'd made. Those people that were unwilling to do that were treating the election like they were treating a football game or a NASCAR race, that they wanted to make sure that they picked somebody who was going to, on election night, be the one they voted for because, the causation correlation, because they voted, that person won. Instead of standing on principle. And if more people had done that, or if they could make arguments against everybody that ran, all four people, then you could abstain, which happens in government all the time. In fact, a lot of times, our people in government abstain en masse so that there isn't what's called quorum. Meaning that if not enough people vote for something, the entire thing gets shit-canned, regardless of how the actual voting turned out. You have to have a certain amount of people participating. And this is where the mainstream media has stepped in and said, if you don't participate, you're not American. And if you don't participate, you don't have a voice or you don't have a say. Absolutely wrong. Abstaining is a voice. Saying the choices that are running are not eligible in my mind. Therefore, I'm going to withhold my vote. This is why we had the Electoral College, and I know it seems like we're getting off on a tangent, but we're not. There is a psychological operation tactic going on out there that uses false causations and correlations, reductio ad absurdum, and all sorts of other techniques to get people to do things they wouldn't normally do, to get people to operate in ways that they wouldn't normally operate. Let's see if I can get this one to pop up real quick. And it's literally this silly. It's just that silly. Everybody who went to the moon has eaten chicken, therefore eating chicken makes you go to the moon. As we go forward and we see midterm elections and we see different events now where we're going to have to operate as intelligent and informed citizens and as psychological operators, as members of the Maquis, we cannot be susceptible to this type of thing. It doesn't mean that you automatically side with this side or you automatically side with that side, or that you fall into the trap of saying, well, I'm going to choose the lesser of two evils, still operating emotionally. We have to be very, very careful about our gates, and I said this to the crew yesterday about the things we allow into our mind, eyes and ears, because there's a lot of crap out there on both sides. And when we can start to recognize things like the fallacy of the four terms, for example, you can read up on this. It's a psychological fallacy that it's called syllogism. It's another video for another day. I don't want to make this very long. But when you read up on this stuff, and you can find it all over our mainstream media, all of the different techniques that they're using to manipulate people into thinking things and believing things, because people are not educated in these terms. They're not educated in these techniques. Formal fallacy, non sequiturs, deductive fallacy, logical fallacies. And all they need to do is get you manipulated for a very short amount of time, that amount of time where you walk into a booth and pull a lever. After that, they don't care. Everything leads up to that. And it's not a new thing, because our founding fathers realized that it was common for large groups of uneducated people to fall behind people, to fall in order supporting someone who was good at motivating people, whether it was based on anger, whether it was based on fear. And so they created the Electoral College, so that no election in this country, and a lot of people don't know this, there is not an election in this country that holds any legal weight for President of the United States. All 50 state elections are simply suggestions for the electors that are picked by the legislatures of each state. Those electors can vote for whoever they want to. Now, they can be subject to state penalties if there's a state law that says, you are required to vote the way the people of the state did, but it doesn't change their vote if they don't. And we went over this back in 2016. But it is a psychological operation on behalf of the government, on behalf of the news organizations, that make you believe that your vote actually has weight. It doesn't. So anyway, we will leave it there. Just understand, really funny, by the way, if you want to see something hilarious, this is called Ba Fest. And this is where people make ridiculous claims, but then go up and make perfectly logical arguments for the ridiculous claim. And some of these have been so well thought out. And like the thing that I described about how babies punting and all that was part of this. And if you want to read, you can go to bahfest.com and listen to these. And they're absolutely side-ripping hilarious. So we'll leave it there. Special access, need to know Wednesday. Thank you guys very much for your patience. I know it's late. We will see you next week. Thank you.